Letters in the Quiet, a peaceful ending for Jamie, Dakota, and Chris. The letter that waited for dawn. The city slept in its own soft hum when Jamie sat at his oak desk, the lamplight cupping his hands in a bowl of gold. He had promised himself, after the photograph that circled the globe, that there would be no more statements, no more explanations, no more reaching for a story that had already learned to breathe without him. But there was one thing left to do, and it did not belong to the world. It belonged to the quiet. He smoothed the thick paper, breathed in, and began. Dear D. If the night keeps anything, let it keep this. I am grateful. For the years we were too young and too bold, for the scenes borrowed from other people's dreaming, for the mornings that taught us to return ourselves to ourselves. I am not writing to rewind the clock. I am writing so we both know the clock can keep going. Words came like a tide, not a rush, but a certainty. He wrote of the award night and the small absolutions braided into it, Dakota's steady gaze, Chris's open hand, the way applause can sound like rain when a room finally believes you mean no harm. He wrote about fear too, the fear of being misunderstood, of hurting what he meant to protect, of becoming a metaphor for a thing he never was. He wrote about his daughters, about the way they slept with unashamed trust in the dark. I once thought silence meant we'd run out of words. Now I think silence is the room where the right words find us. Whatever we were, however the public arranged our names, I choose the simplest truth. I wish you peace. I pray for it the way one prays for weather to change and for shorelines to hold. He signed only with an initial, J, placed the letter in an envelope the color of salt, and slipped it into the pocket of the coat he would wear at sunrise. The city turned in its sleep. Somewhere the sea kept its appointment with the shore. The walk before daylight. It was still blue dark when Jamie entered the little cafe that knew him not as a headline but as the man who ordered tea too carefully, who always carried a book, who sometimes left a generous tip with a note that said for the hour you lost when the register froze. He waited at the counter for the postbox across the street to wake with the world. He thought of the night of the awards, of Dakota, silver as if the moon had told a dressmaker a secret, of Chris rehearsing a chord progression until it felt like a hand finding its home on a shoulder. He thought of the photograph that captured no performance, Dakota between them, a small, impossible bridge, Chris's palm, unafraid, Jamie's fingers around the statue, as if proof were a thing you could put on a mantle and be done with. When the sky turned the thin gray of a promise, he walked out to the red postbox. He slid the envelope into the slot. The soft click was a final period at the end of a long, long sentence. He stood there, palms open to the morning, and knew, some stories do not conclude, they settle. The house by the water. In Malibu, the day opened its eyes with the hush of a wave. Dakota had always trusted the sea. It knew how to keep secrets and how to return them cleaned of their sharpest edges. The baby, soft-cheeked, fist like a star, slept in a basket near the open window where the curtains breathed slow. The doorbell sounded like a remembered tune. When she opened it, she found no cameras, no bouquets angling for a headline, just a courier with a small envelope addressed in a familiar, patient hand. She carried it to the kitchen table. She didn't need to open it yet. Some things are sweeter when they're allowed to hover in their own gravity. The kettle began its soft applause. She poured tea into a mug, sat, and looked out at the strip of ocean waiting like a memory she could visit without drowning. She had watched the award night replay once, no more. It had been enough to hear Jamie thank something larger than triumph. It had been enough to watch Chris sing forgiveness into the rafters without naming it as such. Names were for gates, and they were done with gates. When the baby's breath deepened into the certainty of deeper sleep, she broke the seal. She read every line twice. She didn't cry, there was nothing to cry for. The words were not a plea. They were a laying down of arms. She placed the letter flat on the table, set her palm over it as if to bless it, and whispered, "Thank you." The kettle simmered into silence. The road back to music. Chris came in an hour later with bread that still remembered the oven and strawberries so sweet they seemed like apologies from summer itself. He set everything down, bent to kiss the baby's hair, and found Dakota's eyes waiting for him, calm and full. "From him?" he asked, not careful, just kind. She nodded. Not a return, a release. Chris stood there for a long breath. Then it's doing what it came for. They ate without hurry. He sliced the bread and she sugared the strawberries the way her mother had taught her, only enough to lift what was already there. When they were done, Chris picked up the guitar he kept by the window and stayed quiet until the room told him which key it was ready for. A melody came that wasn't a statement and wasn't a wound. It was a path through a grove of eucalyptus, a twilight road where nobody needs to be anyone's proof. Dakota listened with her head tilted, the baby dreaming of uncountable things. When he paused, she spoke without looking up. "Do you know the word home can be 3 different places at once?" Chris nodded. "I've been a map most of my life. I like it better being a place." She smiled. "Me too." The call that wasn't a crisis. In Belfast, Jamie answered his phone. 1 ring, not 2. Sam's voice came through, the way a river knows which valley to find. "You did all right," Sam said, meaning the speech, and the letter, which he didn't know about, and the way Jamie had learned to let a story end while letting himself go on. "Better than all right," Jamie said. "I didn't fall off the stage." Sam made a sound that might have been a laugh or a door gently closing. "Come north for a few days. Cows, rain, sandwiches too salty. No one will ask you to relive anything." Jamie looked at his suitcase, at the book on the desk, at the window where the light had turned from pewter to pearl. "I will," he said. "And I'll leave my tux behind to prove it." After he hung up, he put the kettle on for the second time that morning, then wrote a line on the back of a receipt and tucked it into his wallet. "You get to keep only what you bless." He wasn't sure if he'd heard it somewhere or if the morning had placed it in his pocket. The Garden of White Orchids. Days later, a small box arrived at Dakota's door, not from a florist but from a nursery that specialized in plants with tender tempers. Inside, a white orchid waited, quiet and improbable. The card was unsigned, but the handwriting would have confessed even if the ink did not. She set the pot on the sill where the light behaved. She whispered to the orchid the way some people pray to saints. "Do what you can, but don't break yourself trying." The baby cooed in agreement. She sent no reply. None was asked for. Later that afternoon, she posted nothing at all, and the internet did not notice because the internet does not notice what it doesn't get. Peace is not an algorithm. Instead, she walked the beach with the baby asleep against her, and when she came to the rocks where the tide pools hold stars at eye level, she sat and watched the small worlds be whole. The room with no headlines. Somewhere in London, a tiny rehearsal studio swallowed sound the way a good teacher swallows blame. Chris closed his eyes and played a song that had no chorus yet. A lyric nudged his hand. "We were thunder when we needed rain. We were candles when the night was kind." He smiled. He wasn't writing about them. He was writing about the people music always belongs to. Strangers in cars, teens with borrowed headphones, someone washing dishes before a small forgiveness. Later he texted Dakota a line with no context and no need for one. "Play the sky," it answered in E major. She wrote back. The baby laughed at the teapot. "I think she prefers minor keys." He sent an audio clip of a lullaby slipped into a smile. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The typing bubbles rose and fell like a tide and then were nothing at all. In Belfast, Jamie walked the hedge-lined lane behind Sam's cottage until his thoughts unfolded into weather. He stopped at a gate where a field opened its arms and said aloud to no one and to everyone, "Thank you." A blackbird watched from a hawthorn, knowing the vocabulary of grateful men. What they kept. They kept the photograph, not in frames, but in memory. Dakota kept it as proof that a room can choose light. Chris kept it as the moment a song decided to be kind. Jamie kept it as the instant the world stopped asking and started listening. They kept their work. Chris tuned and toured again, the lights kinder than they'd ever been, because he finally was too. Dakota read scripts like someone who had learned a language beyond plot. She chose roles that knew how women carry silences without mistaking them for voids. Jamie signed on to stories that would not confuse intensity with harm, that would not ask him to be forgiven for things he never did. They kept their smalls. The coffee that tastes right only in a chipped mug. The text that says arrived? The pillow that smells like the part of your life you didn't lose. They kept the promise not to perform each other anymore. The meeting that wasn't planned. Autumn nibbled at the edges of summer without malice. On a morning salted with wind, two strollers faced each other on a narrow walk above the sea. It wasn't the press. It was two women. One was Melanie, who had learned to hold her daughter without holding her back. The other was Amelia, whose quiet was a room her family trusted. They did not script the moment. They did not exchange lines for the benefit of history. They paused, then smiled, the way people do when the map is exactly as the sky said it would be. "How is she?" Amelia asked, and because names were not necessary, everyone's heart understood who she was. "Good," Melanie said, radiant, even. "And he?" Writing like a river that forgave itself for being loud. They stood there until one baby fussed and the other mirrored the melody. They waved and walked on. The path did not keep their footsteps. The sea kept them instead. The night the city slept very well. There are nights a place remembers. Los Angeles took a long breath and let it out. Belfast stopped pretending it couldn't be tender. London placed a palm on the lids of its tired eyes and said enough for now. Dakota read The Snowy Day out loud, though there was no snow and there would not be any. She did the voices anyway. The baby believed every word. When the last page arrived, as it must, she kissed the soft hair, rested her cheek against the small warm moon, and whispered, "Tomorrow." Chris tuned the guitar and then didn't play it. He listened instead to the air share its secrets with the radiator. He sent a message that had only an ellipsis, then deleted it, then slept without needing what he did not send. Jamie stood at the window again, the city below giving back the stars one by one. He held a postcard, empty on one side, a picture of a lighthouse on the other, and finally wrote 4 words where anyone could see them. "We made it through." He propped the postcard on the mantel and went to bed before midnight. He smiled into the dark like a man who knows the dark has better things to do than frighten him. The last letter, which wasn't. Weeks later, the post brought something back to Jamie. Not his letter, but a reply in a hand he knew. He didn't open it right away. He placed it on the kitchen table and made tea as if he were setting the stage for a play he already loved. He broke the seal. Inside, nothing dramatic. Only a card, the kind tucked into books as a future tenderness. On it, 5 lines. J. There isn't a door to close anymore. The house we lived in is the weather now. Thank you for opening the windows. D. He laid the card flat and laughed, a clean sound with no debris. He folded it once and tucked it into the back of the frame that held a photograph of his girls watching gulls try to outshout the wind. He didn't write back. The answer had already been lived. The Coda. Award seasons turned over like careful pages. New headlines came wearing new names. People fell in love with strangers whose songs and scenes would do for them what Chris and Dakota and Jamie had once done for many. Remind them that feeling is not a flaw. Sometimes, though, a radio in a grocery store found a clips, and a woman pushing a cart would pause at the line about whether learning to listen. Sometimes a streaming cue suggested the silent promise, and a young actor watched Jamie hold a room with nothing but mercy in his mouth. Sometimes an interviewer asked Dakota if she believed in perfect endings, and she shook her head, smiling. "Honest ones," she replied. What the sea said. On the shore where this story learned to breathe, the tide kept its old appointment. A gull marked the air like handwriting that no one needed to read to understand. The baby, no longer an infant, not yet anything else, sang something to the sand and was pleased with her own inventiveness. Dakota sat with a thermos and a blanket and a kind of joy that never once asked for permission. Chris returned from a short run with pockets full of shells that looked like parentheses. Jamie, in a different country but under the same sky, paused on a bridge and let a boat pass under him like a sentence finishing itself. If you had been there, you might have heard it, the sound of 3 lives ending their echo and keeping their music. Not a goodbye, not even quite a farewell. Just this, a bow from the heart, a hand on the doorjamb of the future, and a last look around a room that had taught them how to leave the light on for whoever needed it next. Final lines. There is a myth that the opposite of love is indifference. Perhaps the opposite of love is possession. What they learned, what they left behind for us like chalk marks on a path, was simple and slow. Let people belong to themselves. Let stories choose their size. Let silence do healing that speech cannot. And if you must keep a souvenir, keep what they kept. White orchids by a window, a letter with no anger in it, a song that found its way to kindness, a photograph where no one wins and everyone rests. The credits roll softly, the theater lights rise without rush. Outside, a wind as gentle as a librarian closes the final cover. Peace, at last, is not a chase scene. It is a homecoming you walk to, together, separately, forever.